really huge. It's going to change, not just the way that we communicate digitally, but it's changing the entertainment industry. It's changing what we think about branded content. And, this year we absolutely saw on the industry floor a lot more talent agencies, a lot more kind of traditional entertainment people, a lot of production companies, studios actually showing up. And there's this sense, I think, a couple of years ago, we might have looked at this space as kind of like the minor leagues of entertainment. This is where, people are developing their audiences, and will they actually, continue and grow into something big? I think now there's a general understanding that this is not the minor leagues. This is actually another major league. Right. And it's really interesting to see how deals are being done, and something that we'll talk about in a couple of minutes, Justine, I think is the way that creators are working with studios, with agencies, with brands, and they're pushing back on the traditional methods that we're used to with Hollywood, with entertainment, with branded content.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, and we'll definitely talk about that in a couple minutes. Okay, cool. So speaking of audiences, I think Rob is 100% right in that that's really the biggest differentiator, I think, between when we talk about these creators and we talk about, sort of other talent, if you will. That's really the biggest difference, is the fandom that happens here. And what I think is so interesting is not only how impassioned their audiences are, but also just how niche they are. There are creators and communities around those creators for literally every single type of niche that you can imagine. I mean, everything from LGBT to gaming to tech to beauty to food to pets. I mean, I feel like a lot of these is obvious. We know that there's beauty bloggers out there, and we know that gaming is a big deal. But I mean, books and pets and tech, and the list goes on and on and on. So I think if one of the ways that we always think about content distribution is around impassioned communities. And I think, when you start to work with creators, or when you start to think about content that way and who can really help propel your content forward, that's one of the really great things about using people like this, is they have these amazing communities around really, really niche genres.
Right. And what's interesting from that, I think, and then this again is a shift, and this is, I think, one of the most important things that we came away from VidCon really seeing coming onto its own this year, is that we're not just talking about creators that have tens of millions of followers, right? You don't have to be PewDiePie successful to be successful in this space. And the creators who were really bringing the most buzz, and in some ways generating most of the new revenue, were those in the range of about 250,000 to 500,000 subscribers. And some of those are up and coming, and I'm sure some of those will be in the millions and millions of subs, but some of them, to Justine's point, have found their niche. And what's really
the fandom is there for people with 50,000 subscribers.
Right.
It doesn't have to be the people with millions.
And we met a number of creatives in that 100, 250, 300,000 subscriber range who are actually doing quite well for themselves financially. Mm-hmm. And they don't need to, they would love to grow their audience, but they have a business model that works with that. And I think that's something that's important for brands and agencies to understand. I mean, we're used to, I think, in entertainment, always wanting to work with the top stars and work with who has the biggest audience. And in this space, the biggest audience may not actually be the most effective or the most relevant.
Yeah, rather than just judging on the size of the audience, what we should be judging on is the engagement of the audience. How much time they're spending with their content. Are they coming back time and time again to see that content over and over and over again? And one of the things that I think we'll talk about throughout the presentation is we met with a lot of creators that were actually talking to up and coming creators about how to brands and how to monetize their channels and so forth. And so I sort of felt like we were like a fly on the wall hearing, how they think about agencies. And one of the things that they said, which I think was really interesting to Rob's point, was that at around 50,000 subs is when you can start to really, ask for brand deals and ask for money for your work. not just monetizing your channel in terms of like pre-roll advertising and things like that, but actually collaborating with brands. So I thought that was really interesting. 50,000 subs is what they said.
And we heard that from a number of different creators. It was a much lower threshold than I think most of us would have guessed. And the other thing I think that's really important to talk about when we talk about creators hitting that threshold and being able to truly monetize what they do, there's nothing more valuable to a creator than their long-term viability, right? These are not people who are looking to do this for 3 months, 6 months, a year and get out. These are people who are looking to build audiences that will stay with them over years. This is their career. Some of them, sure, may go on to TV and film and do other things. For most of them, this is their career. This is what they've set their sights on. So what's very interesting is when we hear those conversations, that kind of fly on the wall thing, they're not conversations that are like, hey, you know, you should start a YouTube channel and people start following you and you do this and do that. It's very much around, here are the levels that allow you to make a certain amount of revenue. Here's what, you know, you should and shouldn't do around management. It's become a very organized and professional field, even though it's not aligned necessarily with traditional professional organizations.
That was the biggest difference between this year's conference and last year's conference. I think there was so much more around like helping up and coming creators really make this into a long-term career. I think that was the #1 difference.
Well, so Justin, you were saying that these up-and-coming creators would pay around about $1,000 just to attend the conference and hear from the experts.
Absolutely.
Like and
absolutely.
So if they're making that kind of investment, it just goes to show the potential they feel there is.
Yeah, and I mean, they were meeting, you know, definitely with like the top-tier creators, but it was also an opportunity for them to meet with like technology companies were there, like what cameras are people using?
Right.
I mean, there was so much talk about, oh, how are you using drones in your videos, and how are you using VR? And you know, I think it's really just an opportunity for video geeks to sort of figure out how you make better content.
And it's interesting too that the Green Brothers announced that they're going international as well. So to your point about people paying money to, you know, young creators paying to come to VidCon to learn. I think we're going to see more and more of that as they go global.
Did they announce where their next location would be?
I think Australia.
Australia's one, Australia and Europe, and they're looking at Asia too.
Yeah,
so,
wow.
Yeah,
so
they're really going to expand it.
Going global.
Yeah, I mean, and this is a global phenomenon, without a doubt, without a doubt.
So the next point, Rob actually already touched on this, but we thought it was really interesting. Definitely from between last year and this year's conference, there was such a big difference in terms of who was there from the industry side. There were a lot more brands there this year than they were last year. But in terms of agencies, we really were one of the very few agencies that were there in terms of creative agencies. The agencies I think that were there were people that, you know, you would expect in terms of like the MCNs like Maker and Fullscreen, and there were talent agencies like United Talent, UTA was there, and of course YouTube, who has a huge relationship with all of these creators as well. But I think from an opportunity standpoint, there definitely seems to be an opportunity for agencies to be more involved in this kind of thing.
Yeah, I was really shocked last year at the lack of agency participation. Kind of doubly shocked this year. Now, to be fair, there was a little bit of a scheduling snafu, and VidCon happened the same week as the Cannes Lions. So there were, you know, obviously agencies invest heavily in being present at Cannes. But I was surprised how few agencies sent anybody. So it was really quite an eye opener. There's still a lot going on with this industry that is not registering, I think, across the board with not just agencies, but with a lot of brands, with a lot of other entertainment companies. It's really still early stages, even though it's so huge.
Did you come across any brand marketers that were there off their own back?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. There, more so last year than this year. This year, you can see that the MCNs and like some of the talent agencies and definitely YouTube brought a lot of the brands with them. YouTube had basically a parallel conference within a conference to basically sort of cherry pick the creators that they wanted to introduce to the brands and so forth. But there were a lot of brands that were there that were sort of on their own. There was everybody from like brand managers to digital strategists to creatives, really people just trying to, I think, get a grip or a grasp of what's happening in the industry.
And I think we definitely noticed a shift going back last year, and this is true of the content marketing industry overall last year, year before. We saw brands eager to hire roles similar to a chief content officer or something like that. What we saw this year was a leaning towards hiring influencer relationship specialists and people who would work particularly with creators and agencies around influencer strategy. So I think for the brands that were there, and I'm not going to run down a list of names because I will absolutely leave some off and I wouldn't want to do that.
You can go on the website and see.
Yeah. But for the brands that were there, I was very impressed with how engaged they were. And there seems to be a very strong demarcation between the brands that are interested in this space right now and those that aren't. And the ones that are, I think it's fair to say that there are a dozen or so global brands that are all in on this now.
Right. So it's funny because I think that's exactly right. The brands that are all in, but then there were definitely some brands that were there for the first time and they were completely overwhelmed. They didn't know what to do, what to make of this. They really didn't know what to do with all of this sort of information overload and sensory overload. And again, I think that's where we as an agency can play a really significant role in helping guide our clients through this process because it is unlike anything they've ever done before.
It is, and overwhelmed is a direct quote. We heard that from more than one person who, by the middle of the first day, had retreated back to the hotel to take a break because it's just such an overwhelming sensory experience.
Jamie Pareto is on the line and has just asked, of the brands that are all in, as you say, which ones of those are our clients, if any?
Nestle actually did quite a few seminars and case studies. They presented a really great case study for Toll House, which I don't think is actually an Ogilvy product, but obviously Nestle is. But to be honest, I would love to see more Ogilvy brands there. There was also an exhibition hall, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and I'll show you some pictures of the exhibition hall. But I mean, there was literally every CPG company was there. I mean, there was Dove and Sweet Tarts and CoverGirl. And, you know, I would love to see some more, and I meant Dove chocolate, not Dove skincare. I would love to see some more of our brands there. I mean, there's no reason that we don't have several of our brands on the ground.
Sure, and I think that's true even for everybody on the call, inside and outside of the Ogilvy family. What we saw on the show floor, and as Justine said, we're going to talk about it in detail. But again, another transition where in prior years it was more about maybe sponsoring a booth or sponsoring a creator's booth to actually this year having full branded immersive experiences around the brand product and their creators. So very, very interesting. I think just to close out on this point around the agencies and who was there and who wasn't. A lot of energy this year around kind of deal making and people wanting to get things signed, get things moving. And what's really interesting when we talk about Maker, we talk about Fullscreen and other MCNs and partners, companies we work with all the time. For the most part, these aren't exclusive deals. So the different MCNs can rep the same creator. So there's still a lot of swirl and a lot of confusion. And something that we heard over and over again, and we've heard this throughout the entire creator revolution, if you will, is that for a lot of creators, they would just prefer that somebody drop them an email or pick up the phone and call them directly. And does this make sense? Do we have a brand you would want to work with? Rather than coming at them through networks and through other kind of filters. There's still that kind of grassroots. I mean, would you say that's fair, Justine?
100%.
Very grassroots.
100%, yeah.
And what were some of the reasons for wanting that more direct connection?
I think there's a couple. One is and I can't overemphasize this, it's how much the creators value their audiences. They don't want to do anything that would alienate or annoy or tick off their audience. That is job number one. More than, I would say that care for audience is actually more important than revenue, because they know that revenue will drop if they don't care for
because
the
that's
audience.
Short-term revenue, and they're in it for long-term.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they would rather make the decision about whether a brand or a product or a certain promotion is appropriate for their audience, rather than have someone else make that decision for them.
Rob, Justine, Tom Crampton here.
Hi, Tom.
Just a question for you in terms of the way that, going on that same vein of how these stars think of themselves. Is it right to think of them as analogous to a media property, such as a newspaper or a television station, in the sense of they have an editorial line, and is that a helpful analogy to think about how we should engage with them or think about the issues around engaging with them?
I think that's a great analogy, and actually it's really apropos when you look at what's happening with the creators who are starting to build out their own networks of channels. So our friends at the Young Turks, very present at the show. And the Young Turks has evolved from a single channel now to more than 30 YouTube and Facebook channels, each with its own kind of editorial spin, each with its own set of standards of what they will and won't do in terms of content and advertising. So I think you're right on the money in terms of that analogy.
All right. So just to keep progressing here, because we have a lot of points to make, and I think we're actually making them all along. So this is great conversation. And please keep the questions coming too. These are all great questions. So the next point we wanted to make was around Facebook versus YouTube. So VidCon is not a YouTube event. It wasn't started by YouTube, although it probably should have been, and they probably regret it. But it's very interesting because YouTube is definitely the title sponsor, and they clearly are the dominant player, for VidCon. But there definitely are, Vine stars. There's other people there for sure, but I would say that YouTube is the dominant one. Would you agree?
Definitely, but a lot of buzz this year around Facebook. Facebook is in some ways a challenger brand in this space, and I think that we saw a lot of interest in live video this year. We saw YouTube announcing that they're going to have additional live capacity. So I feel like there's a back and forth competitive-wise. It's actually very healthy right now. And one of the really interesting things that we've heard from creators, not just at VidCon, but again, all the creator revolution, especially the last 18 months or so as Facebook's really become a player, is that YouTube is becoming the place for the creators to kind of set up and establish their long-term shop. YouTube is where their library is archived. YouTube is where they expect to get views over the long haul. Facebook has been extremely valuable for creators in the moment to get immediate buzz around new videos, but Facebook has yet to have the long tail effect that YouTube has. So we don't know anybody in this space who is an either or.
Yeah.
Somebody who says, I will only just work on YouTube, or I will only just work on Facebook. All the smart creators have figured out that they have to be on both platforms, but they have to do, they have to enact strategies for each platform.
Right. So just a shout out to our social app friends. The paper that was written with Social At and Tubular actually has data that proves that very fact, that YouTube really is the long tail platform, whereas Facebook, just because of the innate sharing, is sort of where some of the video is being discovered. But anecdotally, that was reinforced by some of the creators that said that they've seen, every time they post something to Facebook, they've seen their subscriber base grow on YouTube as well. And so I thought that was really interesting. It was nice to sort of have both pieces. We've got the data and the anecdotes to back that up.
Right.
So I'll share that data with everyone on the line shortly. I'll send you a link. But another question that comes to mind, saw recently some stats that Snapchat actually has 10 million video views per day compared with Facebook at 8 billion.
Yes.
Wait, yeah, 8 billion, not million.
Yeah.
So did Snapchat have a presence? If not, why not?
They didn't have an official presence, but definitely there were people, certainly on like the exhibition hall, that were doing some like Snapchat like experiences. So for example, some of, I believe it was Taco Bell who was offering customized Snapchat filters for people,
right.
But they didn't have an official presence. But it was interesting because Facebook didn't have an official presence there either.
Okay.
So everything that like was going on in terms of Facebook was all of the creators and all of the industry folks recognizing that this was a platform that was important to video that we needed to be on. And Snapchat was the same way. There was definitely a lot of talk from the industry folks and from the creators about Snapchat, but they didn't have an official presence at the event.
That's true. It's a really interesting time right now, I think, where creators are trying to figure out Snapchat. This is a conversation that I've had with a lot of creators. There's no doubt about the value. There's no doubt that it's going to grow. But there's a feeling that creators need to find a different kind of content to really be successful on Snapchat. And what one creator, and I don't want to mention who because I don't want to, it was just kind of an off-the-record conversation, but was telling me that they feel that when they're using Snapchat, it's a much more personal conversation, and that has something to do with the vertical video and tending to do things that are more close up, it's less produced, more, you know, it feels like it's more of a personal relationship with the user. So I think a lot of creators are still trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I would expect that next year's VidCon, Snapchat will be where Facebook was this year, where it's, you know, everybody's doing it and they're figuring it out.
Right.
I think it has also something to do with, and this could be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think it has something to do with the fact that these guys think that they are creators and not influencers.
Right.
And Snapchat doesn't necessarily allow them to create long form content, which is a creative endeavor to them.
Yes.
And I do think it has something to do with that.
I agree.
They don't consider themselves like flash in the pan people.
Right.
They are creatives first and foremost.
Yeah.
But that, Justine, that's a very interesting dichotomy we're seeing then, which is previously we almost talked about creators/influencers, and you're saying that there is a further divergence between the two of them now, and we have to start thinking of them as different categories.
Absolutely. I mean, we never talk about these guys in terms of influencers. We call them creators because that's really what they think they are. They are the talent, they are the producers, they are the distributors. Yep. That's how they think of themselves.
We actually heard two creators at VidCon on panels specifically say that they kind of recoil when people call them influencers because they feel like that doesn't actually represent the true value that they bring. Right. And, you know, they love to have influential audiences or have influence over the audiences and have large audiences, but they very much see themselves as a new kind of creative talent.
Right. And even as we see these partnerships between brands and creators or influencers starting to form, I know we've spoken a little bit just internally ourselves around should we actually separate those two tasks, and so, you know, engage people to create content, and then if we want them to promote it, then that's a second piece of engagement, and sort of break up that cost and the scope of work in that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's just hard because if you do partner with somebody like this, obviously you're partnering with them to get to their audience. So you need them to distribute the content, but you need them to create the content, you know? So for them, it's really part of the package. Yeah.
So we're right on the cusp of the conversation here with this distinction. I don't think, you know, the industry hasn't really figured out what creator versus influencer means, but the creators seem to have a very strong opinion.
Okay, so the next slide here is about Exhibition Hall, and Rob mentioned this earlier. It really was, it was great down there. I thought it had improved so much since last year, actually. The brands really went all out in terms of, I think, creating an experience that was very unique for VidCon. It's not like they just took, you know, some samples or some product and handed it out. I felt like they really invested in creating some interactive experiences that were very unique for VidCon. Definitely, like, two of my favorites, M&M's had created a virtual reality thing where you could actually put on the glasses and then you could go into the different houses of like the M&Ms, and you can like tour, you know, the blue house and the red house and whatever. And that was really fun and a great way to bring virtual reality into it. And then, like I said, Taco Bell had some really great custom Snapchat filters that you could do. You could upload them. You know, you could make different videos and upload those. It was just a very, very interactive experience. Sweet Tarts had you creating like custom flavors. Samsung also had a VR experience. Netflix had a really cool experience as well, where you could go. It was a chill lounge, so it was like you could Netflix and chill, but not really.
That would be a family friendly event.
It was a family friendly event. That's me on the right in the Netflix lounge, hanging out at Luke's Diner, promoting Gilmore Girls.
I think, you know, calling it an exhibition hall is correct. That's what they call it, right? I mean, that's what it is. But it felt more like a carnival. It was really, I mean, there were some technology vendors, and you know, I actually bought some tripod accoutrements and some other things for my own video work. There was that sort of thing, and there were T-shirt shops for fans, but it was mostly immersive with any number of stages, and that was one of the things that made the brand booths, I think, really, really hot and happening, especially CoverGirl. The schedules of different creators to come by the booths at different times. So VidCon is all about the fans meeting the creators, and the exhibition hall is one of the areas that's open to everybody, no matter what badge you have. Okay. So creators, industry, fans, everybody can kind of mingle there together. And it is such an immersive experience. Exhibition hall is actually open a day longer than the rest of the conference. There's so much to do there. Exhibition hall is open 3 days. Conference sessions really run over 2 days.
We had after it was closed down to everyone, we had like a private tour for like industry folks. And it was awesome. You got to play with like everything when everybody wasn't there and there weren't lines and like, you know, millions of screaming kids. It was really fun.
So it's worth it to get an industry badge.
Yeah.
It sounds like it was a terrible work trip, you guys.
I know. My life is so hard. It's so hard.
Before we move on, Monica Finch was just asking if you could share a little bit more about what Samsung did.
Oh, yeah. So actually, here's another, the next slide shows you a little bit closer. But the same thing, it was a virtual reality thing. I actually didn't get to experience the Samsung one.
I didn't either. The line was so huge. Yeah. Every time I went by it, I couldn't get near it.
Yeah, but it was the same thing. You put on glasses and they took you through some sort of Samsung world. I wish I could give you a little bit more detail into exactly what that world was, but I unfortunately don't know.
I mean, and honestly, us not knowing, that really is a sign of just how popular and how immense this show is. I tried to participate in a couple of things. I wanted to check out the Sweet Tarts booth and see what was going on there. The only thing that I actually did hands-on, there was the film Secret Life of Pets had screens set up where you could actually design your own pet in the form of the cartoon. So like, you know, I made my French bulldogs, of course, but you know, I waited 25 minutes to do that. Everything else I wanted to do was at least a half an hour wait. And with the panels going on and you know, creator meetings and everything, like, you cannot do it all. It's like going to Disney. You know, like, you are not going to see everything.
Plan that schedule.
At the nighttime thing, when it was closed, I did do. I made my own cupcake for HD TV, so that was fun.
How was it?
It wasn't that good because I basically decorated it with literally everything you could decorate it with. It wasn't that good. Anyway. So in addition to the VR, I think video technology definitely was a big part of the discussion this year. Obviously, VR was huge. 360 video was huge. You know, there were even like some seminars about it. I thought it was really interesting that they were talking about drones. Casey Neistat, your boy, I thought what he said about actually all of it was really interesting. Somebody had asked him about drones because he had just gotten like a new, I guess he's like broken 6 of them recently. And so somebody was asking him about it, and he had a really good answer, which was that, you know, all of these different technologies are really just a way to help them enhance their storytelling and, you know, maybe show a different perspective to the audience. But they never set out saying, oh, I really want to make a VR video, or I really want to, you know, make a 360 video. It's what is the story that I want to tell, and then how is technology going to help me tell that story? And so I thought that was a really good lesson that a lot of us could learn
right.
from.
Yeah, even us brands, we can
exactly
do that.
Yeah. So the next one is about creators becoming more savvy when they're working with brands. This is actually an example, Jamie, to your question for the Nestle Toll House. They had done a really nice case study there where Elise from My Cupcake Addiction was there with the digital strategist from Nestle Toll House, and they spoke about their partnership. I think we've touched a lot on this already in today's discussion about becoming much savvier when working together, and you know, it's really just about understanding where the connection point is between the brand and the creator, so that they can build on something that's really meaningful. I think the creators just don't want to jump into something with a brand that they feel doesn't really represent who they are and who their audience is. I think that's probably the most important point to take out of that. But simultaneously, they understand that this is a job and that they need to communicate things, you know, that the brand really wants them to communicate. And so, I mean, one of the things that we heard over and over again, Rob, you say this all the time too, is that the creators really want to do a good job. It's, you know, it's right. Not like they're saying, you know, just give us your money and let us do whatever we want. They want it to be successful. They definitely want creative freedom, but they want it to work. And so they want to understand, you know, what the brand is all about, what you're trying to accomplish. I thought Elise actually from My Cupcake Addiction had a really good example. She said that when she worked with Nestle Toll House, she actually went into their YouTube channel and started looking at all of their videos to understand how the audience was engaging. And she sort of did a little tutorial for them. And I mean, if anybody understands audience engagement, it's these creators. And so, you know, she was able to say, oh, like, you know, this isn't working or this is working for you. And it was, she used that information to help inform the way that she created the videos. So I just thought that was really interesting. I think it's very clear that they want to do a really good job, but they also want that creative freedom. And brands, I think, need to become savvier in working with creators as well.
Definitely, and you know, it's interesting too as we talk about people who are getting savvy around this. You know, it's not always just individuals. I mean, one of the groups that has impressed me, or companies that's impressed me all along, and really impressed me with a presentation around metrics, was Frederator.
Oh my God, it was amazing.
Frederator is a multi-channel cartoon creation company run by Fred Siebert, my old boss at MTV. Fred was actually one of the founders of MTV. Now, here's a story that I think really shows you the kinds of people that are being drawn to this space now. Fred's actually the guy who came up with the MTV logo, and he drew it on a napkin one night as they were planning out the beginning of the network. So a guy who had the vision to found MTV is now all in on the digital content space. And what's interesting is Frederator has not only gone all in on the content, but they've gone all in on the measurement, all in on the business angle, and probably one of the most impressive creator companies that was there.
Yeah, I thought their presentation was phenomenal. And if any of you are signed up to my Content Captions newsletter, part 3, which was all about algorithms and some tips and tricks, that is something that I took a lot from that presentation as well.
Absolutely. And, you know, speaking of that too, one of the things that we should give a shout out to is our friends from Tubular Labs. So you may, I'm sure most of you who are involved in the space are familiar with Tubular from their analytics point of view. They merged efforts with our friends over at Real SEO about a year and a half ago, and now have rebranded Tubular as pretty much a one-stop shop for daily news and updates on the industry. So Mark Robertson, who runs that side of Tubular, was very active at the conference. Great group of people over there. So if you're looking for somebody to follow for kind of the daily news tidbits and everything, great option. And Justine mentioned Content Captions. Content Captions is a newsletter that she produces at Ogilvy weekly that specifically covers the online video space. So I would encourage you to check out those resources. There's so much going on that honestly, daily and weekly checks probably aren't enough. You probably need to check twice or three times a day.
It's so true. There were so many smart people there, just beyond, the brands and the creators, but it really is sort of the industry innovators. And Rob won't tell you this, but he was on a panel and, of course, had a great turnout and lots of great things to say about video measurement. And he was on a panel last year as well. But it really is a bunch of, video innovators. And I always thought that, Rob knew everything about video. And then you go there and you meet other people that know everything about video. So it really is a lot of fun. So we should keep going. The next slide we covered this, and Tom, to your point, creators, not influencers. This really is how they think of themselves. If you take away one thing from this presentation, it is that do not give them a script. How many times do we hear that, Rob?
Yeah. So this is really interesting.
Do not give them a script.
Creators, they want to work. They really want to work with brands and agencies, and there's a lot of respect for the role of the agency in this. But what they don't want to do is be treated like an actor. They're a creator, and I think that's a really important decision. You hand them a script, they will recoil.
Yeah, if not drop the partnership completely, which multiple people said that they have done. I think this is a challenge for us as agencies, right? Like this sort of blurs the line with our creatives that we have here, our producers that we have here. And I think this is something that as we move forward into this space, again, I think we have a real opportunity to help sort of lead the charge in how we work with these people in a way that's beneficial to all of us.
Absolutely, because the importance of aligning the content to the brand, aligning the content to the customer journey, effectiveness, engagement, the creators are all in on that. They love that. They don't know that space, right? So they rely on the agencies for that. They just don't, like I said, they don't want to be actors in somebody else's play, and that's a really a key piece. We heard a story of a creator who turned down over $150,000 sponsorship because they were being asked to read a script, and it wasn't that they weren't being precious. Like, this is an important distinction. They weren't being precious and say, I won't read someone else's words. They said that script will not work with my audience.
That's right.
And the answer, everything we heard, and we've heard this for the whole creator revolution, the litmus test is, will this work for my audience? And the creators who are serious will walk away from any dollar figure if they think that it will not be good for their audience development.
Right.
So to that point, we heard this over and over again, that when they are making brand deals, they're looking to make all three parties happy. We want the brand to be happy, we want the creator to be happy, and we want the creator's audience to be happy, because if it doesn't work for the audience, they're not going to do it. Another lesson that we learned was just about, talking to each other. One of the creators had said in one of the case studies that was presented was, the best thing that she did was really have several meetings before anything was ever produced. She had several meetings with the brand, and she actually, went in and talked to the CMO, got to know him, and really wanted to understand what the brand was all about, what their vision was, what their purpose was, so that they knew that they were making something meaningful for both of them. And I thought that was really a great point, because so quickly you sort of jump into these partnerships because, they reach the right audience or whatever it is, but it really was about making sure that it's the right match.
And there we saw a really interesting panel, and I was very impressed. The creator who had not known before this year's VidCon, Dottie Clark. She goes by the name Dottie Oddle on YouTube, Doddle. Oddle. And she was very open about that and how she wants to feel like she has a relationship with the brands that she works with. And if you check out her YouTube channel, she actually has a great rant about what it's like.
It's called Brand Rant. Just look it up, Brand Rant.
And a couple of other videos along the same lines where she talks about her experiences of working with brands and agencies and what has worked and what doesn't. It's a little raw, but you know, a lot of the best YouTube content is a little raw.
Yeah.
She's
I'd say the first minute or so is like pretty honest, and then after all, I'm like, all right, look, lady, relax. I started to take it a little personally, but
she meant it about everyone else.
But to that point too, one of the things I think that is consistent with all the really good creators is that they have these strong convictions and strong points of view.
That's for sure.
And again, in terms of working with them, that has to be respected.
Yeah, for sure.
That has to be respected. They feel that what they've achieved by building their audience is theirs, right? So that they're very protective of that.
Yeah.
One of the other points that they made was about setting expectations early. So, you know, again, this was sort of when we were a fly on the wall and we were listening to like top creators talking to up and coming creators about what they should expect when they're working with brands. And, you know, there definitely, I think there's clear acknowledgement amongst all parties that this has not been a very sort of smooth way of working thus far. We've all run into issues when we're working with creators, and they've run into issues when they're working with us. So some of the items to set expectations on early, they said, you know, talk about your brand integration. Like, what is it exactly that you expect? Do you expect me to use your logo? Do you expect me to use your product? You know, some brands literally will tell them, we need you to use the product, you know, by 30 seconds within, you know, into the video. And it's those kinds of things that, you know, they're going to push back on that. And they're going to say, listen, that's really not going to work for our audience. We know that, you know, the first whatever seconds is so important. They're going to want it, you know, in the minute and a half or whatever it is. And those are things that they just kept saying, talk about it early, talk about it early.
Right, and in light of the you know, the recent decisions and around the PewDiePie's branded content and things, you know, the idea of making sure that, you know, everything that you're doing, that you're being paid to promote is upfront and you know, properly handled is a big deal. Again, no one who's serious about being a creator is loosey-goosey about this stuff.
Yeah.
This is their living.
Yeah, we actually have a deck, and we can put it on your portal, that the FTC actually did a seminar about, you know, sort of rules around influencer marketing. And I thought that was a really good one too, like how, you know, when you need to claim, you know, it's a paid ad and so forth. Right. So that's something we can put on the portal for you guys.
FTC for our international audience is the Federal Trade Commission, Federal Trade Commission in the United States.
So other things that they said to talk about up front is, you know, revisions. How many revisions do you expect? What kind of feedback is okay? Some of the creators, you know, will let you give feedback on creative, but others won't. Some of them will only let you give feedback on, you know, certain things. So that's going to cause a huge problem if you don't know that up front. So just make sure you talk about those things. Talk about brand integration, talk about revisions, talk about cost implications. If they are going to go, you know, above the number of revisions that you agree to, is there a cost that's going to be associated with that? Talk about exclusivity. I thought this was such an interesting point. Obviously, you know, all brands, we care about exclusivity, and we don't want somebody that's working with Coke to then turn around and work with Pepsi. However, they made a point, the creators made a point that this is their livelihood, like this is how they make money. So for you to say you can't work with another brand for another year is really impacting their livelihood. And I just thought that was a very interesting way of putting it. So, you know, think about how you could sort of come to a compromise. You know, maybe it's, you know, culling down the time period or the category or whatever it is. But I just thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it from their perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's it. Okay,
Timing.
Wow, right on the money. Do we have time for any questions, Hannah? If there's anything that the audience would like to ask?
Yeah, we definitely have a few minutes for questions, so send your questions in for Rob and Justine. As we wait for some additional questions, we just had Andrea Coliani from I believe our France office saying he just agrees that the line between influence and media approach is more and more blurred.
Yeah.
We had a couple of requests for the names of the video and a few different links, so I've shared all of those into the chat panel, the GoToWebinar chat panel, so keep an eye out for those there. I have a question as we wait for some to come through. You guys have been going to VidCon for a couple of years now, I believe. What was the biggest change this year that you found, and any predictions for next year?
I think the biggest change was how much more professional it was. There was a lot of talk about creators working with brands and making this into a real viable industry and way for them to make money and way for them to make a living. And we didn't see that last year at all. It sort of felt like the wild, wild west. And this year, I really felt like there was a lot more invested in that.
I agree. I think there was a definite feeling this year, and in speaking from colleagues around the entertainment industry, I think confirmed this, that this is the way things are headed now. We hit a maturation point. This is not going away. Right. This is not changing. Last year there were some interesting studies released. Variety released their report during VidCon that showed how the most influential entertainers, over half of them actually were YouTube stars. We did our creator top 30 with the Hollywood Reporter in November, and those were kind of early shots over the bow, I think, for Hollywood. No more early shots over the bow. Everybody understands that this is the place to be. I would argue, and this is not hyperbole, I would argue that in the digital content and space right now, VidCon is the single most important industry convention. It's where the future is being shaped. And again, to what I said earlier, I think that's one reason why it reminds me so much of South by 10 or 12 years ago, where it really felt like that was the vibe, the pulse of what was changing was beating right there. And I think VidCon will probably have a couple more years where it's going to feel like it's the epicenter of all this. Yeah, and then my prediction is by the time we get to VidCon 10, 12, 13, 14, it's going to be an established event like Comic-Con with as much influence, if not more than Comic-Con.
Well, let's all make a concerted effort to get our clients there next year.
Slipping under the wire here, we have a really important question from Jamie Prato, which is really talking about this from an agency point of view. First of all, he makes the point about, do we actually have an agency strategy to engage creators? We need to make sure we add value, and how are we going to make sure, is this going to be something that where we get written out of it, where the creators go straight to, the brands go straight to the creators rather than involving the agency? What sort of take do you have on that?
Two great questions. So first of all, speaking for Ogilvy, yes, we do have a strategy, and in fact, we're revamping our entire influencer marketing strategy to make sure that we're including creators in the right way. And we have in-depth relationships with creators, and hopefully within the next couple of weeks we'll have some really interesting announcements about some new partnerships and tool sets too that I can't talk about yet. But
and let's not forget the red paper that was written.
Yes, if you're interested in we wrote a red paper which is Ogilvy speak for a large white paper. It's actually a 109-page book on working with online content creators that we co-wrote with the folks at Victorious. Victorious is a mobile app company focused on the creator community, and our partner on it, Bing Chen, actually used to head talent development at YouTube. So a very, very interesting read. Hannah will send out the link. It's available as an ebook download for free. Second part of that question is something that Justine and I talked about at length during the show, which is, do agencies get cut out in the big picture? Short term, I think we're going to have some struggles with that.
We already are.
We're seeing it. We're seeing it. We're seeing it not just from Ogilvy's perspective. We're hearing that from colleagues around the industry. Long term, I think there's actually a very important role for the agency to play, because this, in the end, having the proper brand strategy, the brand ideal, and making everything come to life in accordance with our engagement and effectiveness programs, that doesn't change. That doesn't change. So I think where we're going to see a lot of change, Justine said this earlier, is the creative process will change. It already is. And I think that we're going to see the business process change a little bit, but I don't see the role of strategy and good content marketing going away.
Great. Hopefully, Jamie, that answers your question. And with that, it is 12:01, so I think we have to wrap this up. So thank you so much to you both, Rob and Justine, for having an awesome week at VidCon and sharing all your learnings with us. And we look forward to hearing more about VidCon 2017 this time next year.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you so much. Really great presentation.
Bye-bye.